almost don't roadies here with me, so we can be heard. Is that working now?
No. We're lip reading.
I think it is working. It might need to be turned up a little bit. Rolling Stones himself. Keith Richards, he's trained for quit. I told you to cool down. Thanks very much for coming along, folks. You may need to move closer in. I do get complaints that people can't hear, so if you're in any way hard of hearing, don't be shy and move forward. But thank you very much indeed for coming along. I wanted to do a little tour of the country because I felt there was a tremendous amount of gloom and doom over Brexit that isn't justified. And so a lot of it comes from London-based organisations, the Financial Times, the CBI, the Employers Federation, the Times newspaper itself. 2/3 of MPs are voting prefer to remain, which is very different from the way the country voted. I think 2/3 of constituencies voted to leave. So there's a tremendous amount of adverse propaganda. But I think we'll be much better off on the 29th of March if we leave the EU without a deal. One of the big problems is the way the whole thing's been approached, because on the form that came through everyone's door, it said, do you want to leave or do you want to stay? But unfortunately that's been interpreted by the government, and I must admit by the main opposition, to be we'll leave if we can get a good deal. But of course, if I say to you, I want to buy you a car, I'll only buy that car, I'll only buy a car if I can do a deal with you, it's going to put the price up. And people know this, it's common sense, it's just absolute common sense, and everyone understands. But for some reason, the most highly educated people in the land, at the FT, the Financial Times, and in the government, and at the Employers Federation, don't seem to understand it. If you say, I must deal with President Juncker at all costs, what's he going to do? He's going to demand the earth. And that's exactly what he's done. So what I think is if we leave the EU without a deal in only a few weeks, on the 29th of March, we can save £39 billion. I always think if you wake up with 39 billion quid more than you went to bed with, it's quite a good start to the day, isn't it? It's £600 for every person in the UK, man, woman and child, and some people have actually said that's not much money. I'm all gobsmacked by that idea. If you don't think it's much money, wander around the pub here and try and grab a cheque for 600 quid off. And if you've got children, that'll be 600 quid each for them as well. So we can save £600 each, we can save 39 billion, we can regain control of fishing. So we've got a big coastal community, as people in Blackpool know, and if the coastal communities do well, that's good for the country. At the moment, 60% of fish are landed by non-UK boats. Fishermen think it's a plus, but there are actually people out there arguing now that it won't do us any good if we regain control of fishing, which is turning logic on its head, like saying 39 billion isn't a lot of money. But apart from that, we can also become a free trading nation, a coastal nation. We're used to trading historically, a coastal nation, and we can eliminate tariffs on a lot of things. They're invisible, you don't see them. If you buy a glass of Sauvignon Blanc in a Wetherspoon pub, or Aussie Merlot, I see a lady nodding there furiously at the mention of Sauvignon Blanc, that you pay a little tariff. The money's collected by the UK taxman, but it's not given to our government. Where does it go?
Brussels.
It goes to Brussels. So Aussie, this is my brother come up and told him to stop photographing me like this. The Aussie Merlot is only one thing. It's also on rice, on oranges, on avocados, on children's clothes and shoes. Over 12,000 items we pay this tariff, and the money goes to the EU. I haven't seen many bananas growing in Blackpool. So I can't see how it protects any businesses in the UK for a tremendous number of these items, and I'm not sure protection works in the long run anyway, these protectionist EU barriers. So we can eliminate those tariffs and prices in the shops will go down. But I think the main thing that we can get by leaving the EU is more democracy.
Yes.
Instinctively, since I've been an adolescent, I believe, I read my O-level history or whatever it was, I thought, if the world's going to survive, you need democracy. You're not in danger, Canada's not in danger from the United States, even though it's much more powerful, because the United States is a democracy. And New Zealand isn't in danger from Australia because it's a democracy. What you're in danger from, and if you look at the last couple of wars, world wars for example, you don't have to be an academic genius. They're started by dictators, by people who aren't subject to proper democratic control. So, what's that? Well, that's, I'll come on to a few questions in a minute. But I think that the EU is not properly democratic. So it's got 5 unelected presidents. So you may not like President Trump, but the American people voted for him, and he knows and they know that he's up for re-election in 2 years. Yeah. Now, no one ever voted, none of us ever voted for President Juncker. And it's a very important difference. They're trying to make a superstate which isn't properly democratic. And European members of Parliament, unlike our own members of Parliament, can't initiate legislation. So if you or I go and see an MP and we make a point, I say I think beer duty's too high, if he can get his colleagues to agree it, in one building in London they can either not put the taxes up or they can put them down. And they've done both of those things, but at least it's still too bloody high, but at least it's democratic. MEPs can't initiate legislation. They can't initiate legislation for lower beer duty, for example, if they were controlling it, because the legislation can only be started by commissioners. It's so damn complex, and commissioners aren't elected. You know, it's just a crazy system.
We can lower our own beer duty though, can't we?
I'll come to you for the first question, if you like. Our own House of Lords, it's now called the Supreme Court, judges interpret the law, but if Parliament or we don't like the interpretation, it's subject to what Parliament says. But that's not true of the European Court of Justice, which is not subject to parliamentary control. So all these things, I think, have given people a sense, not only in the UK, because we're not quibbling, not arguing, nothing against the European people or European companies. We're talking about the Brussels regime. But a lot of people feel alienated. It's not a properly accountable democratic system. The UK's total MEPs only have 17% of the votes in the EU Parliament. So it's very difficult for them to get anything done. It's remote, the procedures are very complex, and most people have concluded that it's not reformable. Anyway, we voted to leave, but I think democracy is the biggest thing we can get, and I'll just make a final point, and I'm happy to answer some questions. I think that democracy, as I've implied, is very good for the country, But just look around the world. I always think you should look around the world and see how things work elsewhere. But look at South Korea, which is democratic, fantastically successful country, friends of ours and allies. And look at North Korea, which isn't democratic, same people, similar geography. Look at North America, which the founding fathers created a very tight democratic system and wrote a very strong constitution because they wanted to get rid of us. They didn't want arbitrary rule from the UK. And it's been amazingly successful. The biggest economy in the world, etc. And look at South America, which hasn't had that same democracy. It's been dogged by dictatorships and problems. And look at the performance of the South American economy. Similar geography, similar climate, similar landscape, etc. We've mentioned a very good example being Venezuela today, not properly democratic. So I think that the point is democracy works. We need it to, for the future of the world, we need more democracy. We need China and Russia and other countries to develop democratic institutions. And for some reason, which we all struggle to understand, the EU is moving in the opposite direction. It's trying to impose a federal state from above without the democratic consent of the people. And it causes damn chaos. Look at Greece. Poor old Greeks, you know, our friends. And look at Spain with huge youth unemployment. The idea that currency, which isn't supported by a government in the Eurozone, tremendously high youth unemployment in the south. So I think all those things together, more democracy, saving 39 billion, regaining control of fishing, eliminating protectionist tariffs on a lot of the imports into the UK, on balance will do much better without a deal than staying in the EU. There may not be any questions, but I've probably summed up the future of the entire world. But did you want to ask me a question there?
Well, you did mention that we can't. We can set our own duty on beer. They do it every budget, don't they? Penny off a pint.
Yes.
Typically, and so that sounded like a red herring anyway, and it's a small point. But you mentioned dictators. I mean, Russia and dictators starting war. And you talk about Russia and China, and you talk about the EU in the same breath. That's ridiculous.
Well, no, I simply said that for the future. Let me answer your question. I don't mean to equate the EU with Russia or China. I don't actually, not here today to criticise Russia or China either. I'm just saying that I feel that we'll be better off if Russia and China become more democratic.
Dictators start wars. The EU is a far cry from a communist dictatorship.
Well, let me answer.
Well, we can members can veto that, mate. Members can veto it.
Why are we outlawing America?
You what? Sorry, pal.
Well, pal, the EU want to alienate the USA.
Let me answer the questions. Fair enough. If this gentleman wants to come and ask some questions, let him ask. Not everyone agrees with what me or most of you probably. So if you want to ask a question, you can, but don't argue back.
They asked me about why the EU wants to alienate the USA. They don't want to alienate the USA. They just want to have a voice that's as strong as a massive economy. I mean, we want to have a say against China. We want to have a say against the USA. We don't want to get eaten up by them large forces.
No one's arguing with that. That's not quite a question. No one wants to get eaten up by
that was just an answer to this guy that's shaking his head at me, mate.
No, I'm not listening to him. I'm listening to your questions. That's fair enough. Any other questions?
For the past 2.5 years, Jim, you have spoken the most common sense. We understand what you're saying.
This is another brother here. You can have one every day. Any questions here? Yes, sir.
Like you got elected MPs trying to stop Brexit happening. He was under the control of Brussels, who were a corrupt regime. Why they trying to do it?
the gentleman here will take offence if you say it's corrupt, but it's certainly had trouble auditing its books over the years. But why are our own MPs not obeying the referendum result? Well, it's a very good question, and I think that there's a terrific problem in the UK, but it's also a problem throughout Europe, whereby the elites have almost a religious belief in the EU as a new type of institution. Now, I spoke to Michael Heseltine 15 years ago because I was opposing the euro and he was in favour of it, and he surprised me really, but I think it sort of explains the question what the philosophy is. He believes, and maybe this gentleman here shares it, that the future of the world is better if we give away democratic power, some democratic power, to what he called a supranational organisation. I never heard the word before, like the EU. So it has power over lots of individual democracies. So a lot of our MPs, if you've been to Oxford or Cambridge University, I've noticed, you really like to believe this, they think you're better off with not full democracy, as I described it, but with power held by this supranational organisation. I think you're better off and safer if you leave full democracy in Greece and France and Germany and the UK. And that's the answer. But the short answer to the question is some people have an almost religious belief in the EU. They'll even vote for the euro and argue energetically for it, even though its predecessor, which if you had a mortgage in 1991 or 2, you'll remember, collapsed, the exchange rate mechanism. They still wanted to vote for the euro. Yes, sir.
Right, you're talking about the euro, Tim. I'm on your side now, absolutely on your side. The euro, Greece. Let's talk about Greece. It's got three currencies. It's got the old currency, it's got the euro, and it's got the Hong Kong.
What's your name, sorry?
Jimmy.
Jimmy, that's not really a question, it's more of a statement. But if you've got a question...
I'm sorry, Tim, but it's the way I feel.
Okay, so it's what Jimmy feels, that's fair enough.
If we have a second
Hold on, I have to come to you. Yes, I'm going to take a question. I think I've seen you at some other pubs, unless my
you might have done, Tim, and can I say thank you, and it's wonderful to hear a privately educated multi-millionaire complaining about the elites.
Yeah.
But what you have said, what you are advocating, the no-deal Brexit, the only substantial economist to support that, Patrick Minford, the man who came up with the poll tax, he acknowledges that if we do this, then we will have no more agriculture and no more manufacturing. That is what he has said. He's the only economist to advocate.
Can I?
How are we going to survive without those?
I don't mind. I'm not sure I was privately educated actually, but anyway, we let that pass. I'm quite happy for
Studied law.
privately educated people like Jacob Rees-Mogg, for example, or Boris Johnson to support our case. It's not. A lot of the elites are in favour of the EU. Some have seen the light and realise they have to leave this Mooney-like cult. But there was another aspect to your question there, which was about Patrick Minford, who is an economist for Economists for Free Trade. He says he thinks that the UK will be 7% better off if we leave the EU. And of course he's not the only one. Roger Bootle from Capital Economics, Gerard Lyons, who was the chief economist, I think, for the Mayor of London, and quite Liam Halligan, a famous writer. So a lot of people don't think that the EU is the most successful economic model in the world. But it's a fair question, polite question, which I would like. Any more questions? Yes. Oh, no, hold on. Because you're related to me, I'll have to ration you a question. Yes, madam.
Why do people insist that leaving without May's deal is a no deal when it's actually, there is a deal at the end of it, and it's the WTO deal?
Yes. It's a good question. What economists for free trade say is people are far too fixated by deals, and Theresa May definitely is. And that if you leave without a deal, you can still trade with America on the same terms as today. China, the EU's got no deal with America, no deal with China, no deal with India, and it's been going for 40 odd years in one form or another. So you don't actually need a deal, and this is the point. In fact, trade from America with us will be better, because at the moment, if you're a car manufacturer and you're importing parts from America or an IT company, it's subject to EU tariffs. So you're dissuaded from setting up in this country if you have to import parts from outside the EU. So if we eliminate the tariffs, which Patrick Minford, which has been named by the gentleman over there, has suggested, you can import car parts from Japan, etc., without these import tariffs. So there are advantages and possibly some disadvantages. But the very interesting thing is that the EU, and I was quite gobsmacked to read this, Donald Tusk in October, I thought, have I read this right? He said, we have offered the UK a free trade policy called Canada Plus Plus Plus. It's a free trade policy. But for some reason, Theresa May turned it down. And she appears to have wanted to stay in the customs union. I just do not understand. But the EU is obviously needs to do a deal. And I'll just give you one example, which I'll come back to a question. I forgot to mention it. A lot of us heard the channel ports were going to block up. And I don't think that's right. The head of Calais ports, Monsieur Puissesseau, said there will be no delays. I don't know what people don't understand about there will be no delays. Possibly he was speaking French at the time, and we didn't understand. So if there are no delays on the French side of the border, why the hell would anyone on this side of the border introduce delays? I just don't think it happened. But we said, okay, let's assume there are delays. What would we do? Because there's massive doom and gloom about the port seizing up. So we took some of our products as an experiment. Not just any old product. We took sacrilege here for some of you. We took French brandy, massively popular, very good product and good supplier to us over the years, and we swapped it for a brandy from those rough old Australians. It's actually, although they're a bit rough, as I've often told them, their brandy is very good. And we swapped the #1, I think, imported spirit into the UK, which is Jägermeister. Have I mentioned this product? I don't think I have. So you don't drink it, and I don't drink it, but it's, but, my God, misspent, middle age. But it's, we swapped it for Striker from Chorley in Lancashire. We tested it first, it's a very good product, and it's selling extraordinarily well. So you can read the papers, our sales haven't gone down, they've gone up. So my point to prove was, even with these iconic products from the EU, you can buy anything that you can buy from the EU from the 93% of the world that isn't in the EU.
Yeah.
So the people who lose out if the port seize up are not, apart from short-term, excuse my language, buggeration value, well, not the UK. It'd be the suppliers from Europe. So I think it's a bit of a red herring there. You wanted another question there.
If we do ever go down this road as in being called a second referendum, if we end up with the same sort of result, or God forbid the result changes and they manage to swing it, we end up the same, we're going to get eaten alive, aren't we? They're going to eat us alive.
The British lion will not get eaten. Well, I think I wouldn't worry about that. I just glanced at a headline in one of the newspapers as I was driving over here this afternoon, and apparently Chuka Umunna and Sarah Wollaston, who are proposing a second referendum, have given up. they can't take the pressure from us. It's pump power. Well, I'm going to drink the rest of your pint. Question here from the gentleman, then I'll take a question over here, and then I'll take yours. Do I think we'll leave on the 29th of March?
Yes.
Well, I'm hoping that we will, obviously. There's a lot of machinations going on in Parliament. I think don't be frightened to write to your MP. Rather than an email, after the day, write your MP a letter, say we want to leave. I'm optimistic that the will of the people will prevail in the long run. In the short run, I don't know if it will or not. Yes, sir. I'll take both of you at that table. You can go first because you're better looking. Well, they're both trying to speak now. Well, I think the gentleman asked what would the words be if there were a second referendum, but I think we get into the realms of speculation there. They were very plain on the first referendum, leave or go, leave or stay, because it's governed by the Electoral Commission, who've been criticised for some of the things they do, but one of the things they will insist upon is a very straightforward question, I believe, because anything else is undemocratic and a muddle. Yes, sir.
Can I just ask you, on the back of that one, who will choose? What if the members of Parliament who choose? The 75% who want to remain, will they be choosing?
I think the government will produce a question, as I understand it, and it will have to be approved by Parliament, and it will have to be vetted by the Electoral Commission. And they did quite a good job the last time of making it crystal. When you went into the voting booth, you didn't think, bloody hell, what's all this about? You understood what the question was. And of course, a lot of people say, you didn't understand what the question was. Yes, sir.
There's a lot of mixed messages coming from the business side. I mean, you've got the likes of yourself and JCB that are quite happy to operate outside the EU, but then you've got the likes of Land Rover who say we can't operate outside.
Yeah, so Land Rover's not British.
What's your views on that? Because the business, obviously business is paramount.
True.
But they can't seem to agree where is the best place to be to operate there.
Well, it's a very good question. There were some businesses say we're better off staying in, and some businesses say we're better off leaving. I think here the public has to look at history, and we were told in no uncertain terms that if we didn't join the euro, a lot of businesses would relocate to the continent, and the economy would therefore go downhill because they would be exposed to currency risk if they were located in the EU. That never happened, and we've actually done better, far better economically than the Eurozone since the creation of the euro. The second thing is that a lot of these businesses, including, for example, Airbus and the car manufacturers, said that immediately they backed the case of George Osborne, the Treasury and the OECD and the IMF and all these economists said immediately on voting leave, that's not when we left the EU, but after June 2016, the economy would go off a cliff and interest rates would go up, there'd be an emergency budget, unemployment by today would be 500,000 more.
60 million of profit freezing.
So that's the second thing they got wrong. So I think that all you can do is use your common sense, and I think common sense says saving the 39 billion, operating a business-friendly environment with no tariffs, like Singapore, for example, which is very attractive for
It already has done.
The gentleman here is worried about the pound dropping, but a lot of my career, the last 40 years, the pound has been felt to be too high. And that's what a lot of economists said it was before June 2016. The pound dropped, yes, it did push up our prices a bit for a while, and inflation's back to quite low. It helped inward tourism, so a lot of people were staying in Blackpool or going to Cornwall, and we had a massive influx of tourists from other parts of the world. and it was very good for our exporters. They became more competitive. So the pound going up has always gone up and down, inside the EU or out, and it always would, and that's a good thing. It's an automatic stabiliser for the economy. There was someone over here. Yes, sir.
Yes, do you have an inside knowledge, or do you know why Theresa May happened to dispense with choose now the third Brexit throughout the process? Do you know why that was happening for all?
Yeah, being a Brexit secretary with Theresa May is a bit like being Henry VIII's wife. It's an extremely dangerous situation to find yourself in. And I think, in all seriousness, in reply to your question, Theresa May wants to remain in the EU.
Yes.
But she wants to create something which she can kid herself is actually Brexit. But of course, it's not really. What you were right. Yeah. But the could Theresa May be secretly sabotaging our exit? The answer to that is no, because it's no secret. But she is sabotaging it. Yes. I'll take a couple more questions and then I'm going to hit the road for pastures new. Much as I like Blackpool, I'm going to walk along the seafront before that. Yes?
How can you say that 50% if you've got a space when the two most of the lead campaign, Mr. Juncker, will give a money to the party?
So I'm asked how the 52% vote for Leave can be, did you say democratic?
Well, how can it be portrayed as the will of the people?
How can it be portrayed as the will of the people when two of the big campaigners went through a different side of the lobby? Well, it's an interesting question. Of course, it was whether to leave or whether to stay, and the vote was to leave, and the percentage of 52% was a lot more than one that created the Welsh Assembly, I think, and so on. But why they went through a different part of the lobby? Well, it's the definition of leave, isn't it? And I think that's probably what it boils down to. I'm not so keen on Michael Gove's position in all this. I think he could have been a bit firmer. I'll take a question from this gentleman here, and then I will take another one from you, sir. Yes.
Hi, Tim. Today the Polish Prime Minister has sort of begged the Polish people to go back to Poland to work because things are better. Their money, their employment rate. You employ a lot of EU people, and I wonder how it's going to affect you, and also other English, British
employers.
Farmers. When we leave, if there is no agreement.
Can I answer the question?
Yes.
I'm asked about Wetherspoon employed.
Gone off.
I'm back. It wasn't the cameraman he assured me. I did tread on his toe, mind you. But I think in that respect, I'm actually quite liberal on immigration. I think, for example, we shouldn't have £30,000. Someone wants to come and work in the NHS. They shouldn't be. They come from France. I'm personally very happy if they've got a job, come over here. And I think I think a lot of people agree with that. But what I want is immigration to be controlled by our own government. Now, at the moment, 2/3 of immigration is from outside the EU. So no one's talking about pulling up the drawbridge completely. I'm very happy for some type of immigration system with the EU that gives them, because of proximity, closeness to the UK, people can find a job. I'm perfectly happy with that, if they're coming to work here. So we've got 64 million people in the country. We've got considerable immigration from outside the EU. I want it to be immigration from the EU to be controlled by our government so we can see where it's going in the future. And apart from that, I haven't got a problem, but I'm certainly sure, as I think most of the people will be here, people who've moved here legally and lived here legally should be allowed to stay. And they've been excellent citizens for the most part. Yes, sir, I'll take one more from you. If you would like another question.
It's going back a little bit, but the 52-48 vote, given that the Electoral Commission themselves have said that there was so much fraud during the referendum campaign that the results cannot be considered an accurate...
Don't shout the lad down, let him say his piece.
Let me answer the question. Don't shout out rubbish, just let me answer the question.
Given that there was that much fraud, how can we say that that was the will of the British people?
Well, I never heard that there was that much fraud. There's always a certain amount of controversy, but I never heard it.
There was fraud, Tim. They're finding in a judicial
Well, I think if they found it had been a fraudulent election, they would have rerun it or a fraudulent referendum. Take two more questions. I'm going to go. You haven't asked one yet, sir. You're a little, but you're very good looking.
I want to ask you, Lee doesn't have a big enough profile. We'll have to expand the profile because I think it's the BBC, Sky, Rob Soros, and Uncle Tom probably and all. For instance, yesterday, Kate Burnley was on Sky, and she was on the Irish border. Now, she interviewed two people in the Irish border.
That's a dangerous game.
Yeah, the portion of the Republicans, and they brought in the Good Friday Agreement.
So the gentleman here saying, what's the question?
The question is this: there were these two people before the Republic, and they brought in the Good Friday Agreement. Now, the Good Friday Agreement was brought in 1998. 4 months after the Good Friday Agreement was brought in, the Roma bombing was 29 people.
Well, listen, what's your first name? Malky, listen, I don't think we can afford to get into the intricacies of the Irish border, or indeed to get into too much detail, because many of these things need to be sorted out in Ireland by the Irish people. I think what Malky's saying is he feels, and that's why I'm going around the country, that there's a metropolitan media, I don't like to use the word bias, but the people from that background strongly believe in Remain, and sometimes that comes through, not always, but sometimes it does. I think a lot of them conscientiously try not to be biased, but all we can do is make the case ourselves, write to your MPs, write letters, and that's been good enough not to go in the Euro, it's been good enough to win the referendum, and I think it's pretty powerful when people know you have a vote. So yeah, I'll take the last question here. I'll take one more over there, and then that's it. Yes, sir.
Thank you for that, Tim. It's really about a lower tax regime for Wetherspoons, isn't it?
Let me answer the question. It's really about a lower tax regime for Wetherspoons. I think he's very hard to believe that himself, but he's having a little bit of a joke. I mean,
no, I do my own research.
I can't see how it will mean a lower tax regime for Wetherspoons. We will vote in a government. There's two. One is Labour, one is Tories who win these elections. And,
there's EU directives coming up.
It depends on the tax regime which they put in, doesn't it? Every pint of beer, I don't like to say this actually, it makes me feel bad, but 44% of every pint you drink in a Wetherspoon pub goes in taxes.
To the NHS to treat alcohol problems.
I thought you wanted to hear what I say, but you're not listening. You just 44% of it goes in tax of one type or another. So 1/1000th of all UK taxes are paid by Wetherspoon. So you need only 1,000 companies like us, and no one would have to pay any tax, which would be rather nice. But dream on, baby, as they say.
Majority shareholder.
I'll take one more question here.
It's just that the NHS has 40,000 vacancies for nursing staff.
Yeah.
Right? Now, most of the nurses in Spain and Portugal, they've dried up by 95% since the referendum. What are we going to do
Well, let me answer the question. I mean, I've just been, unfortunately, I'm very fortunate that I survived it. I've just been in hospital for 8 days after a burst appendix before Christmas, and I'm extremely grateful for the staff. I didn't get the impression that the nurses were that percentage were from Spain and Portugal, but they certainly were fantastic nurses. And I think that we can run an immigration policy, in fact I said it and should, that allows nurses from Portugal and Spain to come and work here. That would be my simple answer.
A lot of friends that still work there.
I'm going abroad.
My daughter does.
But I think the point is that it's not as simple as that, is it? We could say I work in a pub and everyone votes Brexit, but it doesn't take the argument that much further forward because it's a national referendum, isn't it? It's, everyone's got an equal voice.
Exactly.
But thank you very much indeed for listening. I really appreciate it. It's a good debate. Not to say about debate. Thank you very much. Thank you for the question.